The city was crowded and noisy, with people rushing everywhere. She walked slowly, carrying a small bag over her shoulder. She had been working all day and felt tired, but she liked walking a little before going home. The streets were full of strangers, each busy with their own life. She kept her head down, thinking about the day and the things she still had to do. Suddenly she felt someone bump into her. Her bag slipped from her shoulder, and some of her papers fell to the ground. She looked up quickly and saw a man bending down to help her. He picked up the papers carefully and handed them back to her. She noticed his eyes, calm and kind, and something inside her felt warm. He smiled slightly and said it was no problem. They stood for a moment, both unsure of what to say next. The noise of the city felt distant for a few seconds. She felt a strange feeling she had not felt in a long time. He asked if she was okay, and she nodded, still holding the papers tightly. They walked a few steps together because the street was crowded. Neither of them wanted to separate immediately. She noticed that he moved carefully, like he was always considerate of others. They talked a little about small things, the weather, the traffic, nothing important, but it felt natural. She laughed softly at something he said, and he laughed too. It was a small sound, but it made her feel lighter than she had in weeks. The city was still loud, still busy, but this small moment felt like it belonged only to them. Then they reached a corner, and the moment had to end. They both paused, not sure if they should leave or ask something. He said goodbye softly, and she said the same. She watched him walk away, feeling a little surprised by how much she wanted him to stay. She shook her head slightly and continued walking. But her mind kept going back to the brief encounter. For the next few days, she found herself thinking about him. She wondered if she would see him again, or if it was just a random moment that would disappear. The thought made her smile, but also made her a little sad. She kept her eyes open when she walked outside, hoping to find him, even in the busiest streets. He, too, thought about her. The encounter had been short, but something about it stayed with him. He found himself remembering the way she smiled, the way her eyes lit up, and the way the world seemed to pause for a moment when they were together. He was usually calm and focused on his work, but he found himself distracted, hoping to cross paths with her again. Days passed, and the city moved on. People rushed, cars honked, and life went on, but both of them felt a quiet pull toward each other. Small coincidences started happening. They ran into each other at a small cafe and again at a bookstore. Each time, the conversations grew a little longer, the smiles a little wider. They began to notice the small things about each other. She noticed how he listened carefully, how he seemed to remember the little details she mentioned. He noticed how she laughed softly, how she seemed to care about small things in life. One evening, they met near a small park. The sun was setting, and the light made the streets look soft and warm. They walked together slowly, talking about their day, about dreams, about small things they liked. It felt easy, like they had known each other for much longer than a few days. They shared little stories, and sometimes just walked in silence. Feeling comfortable being near each other, she felt something stirring in her heart, a feeling she had not felt in a long time. She felt seen, noticed, and understood. He felt the same way, a quiet happiness he did not expect but welcomed. They did not need to say everything. The moments themselves were enough. Every small laugh, every glance, every word built a connection neither wanted to end. The next week their encounters became more regular. They would meet at the same cafe or walk together when their paths crossed. Each meeting was simple but meaningful. They started sharing little things about themselves, stories from childhood, favorite books, memories that made them smile. They were learning about each other slowly, and each discovery brought them closer. Even though life was busy and complicated, these small moments became the most important part of their days. The city was still noisy, still crowded, but for them, a small bubble of calm and happiness existed whenever they were together. They began to look forward to seeing each other, to hearing each other's voice, to sharing a moment that was just theirs. One afternoon, they sat on a small bench near a quiet street. She spoke about something that worried her, something personal and heavy. He listened quietly, offering a gentle word here and there, not trying to fix anything, just being present. That moment, simple and honest, made her feel safe in a way she had not felt before. She realized that she could trust him, that he would not judge her or leave. He felt the same. The small kindnesses, the patience, the attention to detail showed him that she cared, that she was genuine. He realized that life had brought them together in a way neither of them could fully explain, but both felt thankful for. They did not rush anything, but the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. As the sun went down and the streetlights began to glow softly, they walked slowly, side by side. Neither spoke, but neither needed to. The simple act of being together, of sharing space, was enough. Both felt that something important was beginning, something that could change their life, something worth exploring. The city continued its rush around them, but in their small world, there was calm. They did not know what the future held, or if their paths would always stay close. But for now, they felt a connection that was real and beautiful. A connection that started with a simple encounter, a bump on a crowded street, and grew through small moments, shared stories, and gentle understanding after the first few encounters. They began to notice each other more often in the small routines of daily life. The city felt less overwhelming when they were around each other. Sometimes it was just a glance from across the street or a smile at a cafe counter, and those small moments brought a quiet happiness to both of them. They found themselves thinking about each other in the spaces between work and daily responsibilities. One afternoon, she decided to visit a small bookstore she had discovered recently. She loved the quiet corners where she could lose herself in pages of stories and dreams. She had not expected to see him there, but there he was, standing near a shelf of books that she liked. He looked up, and their eyes met. A simple smile passed between them, but it carried the unspoken message that the brief connection from before was not gone. They walked slowly through the aisles, sometimes side by side, sometimes pausing to point at a book or share a short thought. It was easy and comfortable, like finding a familiar rhythm. They started to talk more about their lives. She shared stories about her childhood, small memories that made her laugh quietly to herself. He listened attentively, asking questions, not because he needed to know, but because he genuinely cared. He spoke about his own life, the challenges he had faced, the moments that had shaped him. Neither rushed to impress the other. It was simply two people slowly opening their hearts, letting small pieces of themselves be seen and understood. The days passed, and each time they met, even by chance, their bond grew. They found small excuses to be in the same spaces, walking along streets that felt less crowded, sitting in the same cafe, or visiting parks that offered quiet corners. Sometimes they did not speak much, just enjoying the presence of the other. Those silences were not empty. They were full of a calm connection, a feeling that each had found something rare in the other. One morning, she felt nervous before leaving her apartment. She did not know why she felt this way. The thought of meeting him, even if only by accident, brought a strange flutter to her chest. As she walked down the familiar streets, she kept her eyes open, hoping to see him. And there he was, waiting near the entrance of a small bakery. He waved, and she waved back. They shared a quiet smile before going inside together, choosing a table near the window where sunlight fell softly on the wooden surface. They ordered simple things, a cup of tea and a small pastry. They did not need elaborate gestures or fancy places. The simplicity of the moment made it special. They talked about their week, the small victories, the frustrations, and even the mundane routines that somehow became interesting when shared. She noticed the kindness in the way he spoke, the patience in his manner, and the thoughtfulness that showed he remembered details from previous conversations. He noticed the warmth in her voice, the quiet determination in her words, and the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about things she loved. After the bakery, they walked through a nearby park. The trees were just starting to change color, and the air was soft with the hint of autumn. They walked slowly, noticing the little things around them, pointing out leaves or a bird that flew past. It felt like the rest of the city had disappeared, leaving only the two of them in a quiet, shared world. She felt a happiness that was simple but deep, a feeling that this connection was more than coincidence. He felt the same, a quiet joy that came from being understood and accepted without pretense as the weeks passed. Their meetings became a comforting routine, though neither of them labeled it or forced it into a schedule. They discovered favorite spots together, a small cafe tucked away from the main street, a quiet bench in the park where sunlight fell gently in the afternoon, a street where the flowers bloomed in spring. They shared small moments of laughter, quiet observations, and gentle gestures that spoke louder than words. Every time they were together, the world felt calmer, more manageable, more meaningful. One evening, she told him about a small fear she had carried for a long time. She spoke carefully, unsure of how much to reveal, but he listened without interruption. He did not try to solve her problems or give advice. He simply listened, letting her feel heard and supported. That simple act of presence made her trust him even more. She realized that sometimes love was not about grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but about quiet understanding and the willingness to be there for each other in small, meaningful ways. He, too, shared pieces of himself that he had kept private. He spoke about moments of doubt, about struggles he had faced silently, about the times he had felt lost but found strength in small things. She listened carefully, never judging, never interrupting. The connection between them grew stronger because of these small revelations. They were learning to understand each other beyond the surface, building a foundation of trust and empathy that neither had expected but both welcomed. Their friendship deepened without them realizing. They began to notice the comfort they found in each other. Even when they were not together, thoughts of the other brought a quiet smile or a sense of anticipation for the next encounter. The city, once overwhelming and lonely, felt smaller and warmer when they were near. Their shared moments became islands of calm in the rush of everyday life. One afternoon, they discovered a small art exhibition in a quiet gallery. They wandered through the rooms slowly, stopping to look at paintings and photographs. She pointed out a painting she liked, and he listened to her observations, curious and attentive. He showed her a photograph that reminded him of a place he had visited, explaining why it held meaning for him. They shared stories, memories, and emotions, discovering more about each other in the gentle way two people can when they are truly present. They walked out of the gallery as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. The streets were bathed in golden light, and the air had a soft chill. They walked side by side, neither speaking much, but neither needing to. The simple act of being together, of moving through the city at the same pace, was enough. It was in these quiet, shared moments that their bond deepened, layer by layer, like a gentle unfolding of something precious. As the days turned into weeks, they began to realize that their connection was not just a fleeting coincidence. They laughed more easily, spoke more openly, and found themselves thinking of each other in ways that went beyond simple friendship. There was a comfort and warmth that neither had experienced with anyone else. Small gestures, like remembering a favorite tea or offering a hand to help with a bag, became meaningful tokens of care and attention. They also discovered small challenges in understanding each other. Sometimes they disagreed on small things or misunderstood intentions, but even in those moments they learned patience and empathy. They realized that building something real required effort, attention, and a willingness to see the other person clearly. The challenges were small, but they shaped the bond in ways that made it stronger and more resilient. As the weeks went by, their bond continued to grow, but life began to show its usual difficulties. Small worries and challenges that had seemed distant before now came closer. Work was demanding for both of them, and sometimes fatigue made it hard to stay present with each other. She noticed that he sometimes seemed distracted, staring into the distance, and he noticed her quiet moments of worry. They both cared deeply, but the pressures of everyday life began to create small cracks in the calm world they had built together one afternoon. She arrived at their usual cafe, hoping to see him. The air was crisp, and the streets were lively. But when she reached the table they usually sat at, he was already there. Frowning slightly as he looked at a piece of paper in his hand, she smiled gently, trying to ease the tension, but he did not respond right away. He looked up slowly, and she could tell that something was troubling him. He tried to hide it at first, saying that it was nothing important, but she could sense the worry beneath the words. She did not push, simply sitting across from him and letting him speak if he wanted to. Slowly, he began to share the challenges he had been facing. A project at work had become complicated, and the pressure to meet expectations was weighing heavily on him. She listened carefully, offering quiet encouragement, but also feeling the weight of the reality that life sometimes brought, its unexpected burdens. She tried to share some of her own worries, about work deadlines and responsibilities she could not avoid. For a moment, their small world of comfort and ease felt heavy with the weight of real life. They both realized that their connection, though strong, was being tested by circumstances beyond their control. They sat together quietly for a while, neither speaking much. Both aware that love and friendship often came with struggles and uncertainty. A few days later, a misunderstanding occurred that neither had expected. She thought he had canceled their meeting deliberately, feeling ignored and unimportant. He had assumed she was busy and did not want to disturb her, not realizing that she would feel hurt by his absence. The small miscommunication grew into tension, and both felt frustrated and distant. Words that were not spoken built walls between them, and each felt the sting of separation, even though neither had intended it. During this time, they avoided each other, walking past familiar streets without looking for the usual cafe or park bench. The city felt larger, louder, and lonelier, without the comfort of shared moments. She kept thinking about him, wondering if he felt the same hurt and confusion. He thought about her constantly, wishing he had spoken sooner, wishing he had clarified the misunderstanding before it grew into something more painful. Both felt the emptiness that comes when a meaningful connection is suddenly interrupted by miscommunication. Eventually, one afternoon they found themselves at the same bookstore again, both drawn by the quiet corners that had become their refuge. Their eyes met across the aisles, and for a moment, neither moved. There was a mix of relief and hesitation, a recognition that despite the tension, the bond between them remained. They slowly approached each other, exchanging a soft smile, and sat together in the small reading area. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was a pause filled with the awareness that they had both missed each other deeply. He spoke first, explaining the pressure he had been under and how he had not meant to hurt her. She listened and then shared her feelings, explaining how his absence had made her feel unimportant. They both realized that the misunderstanding had grown only because they had not spoken openly. The conversation was honest and gentle, filled with the kind of vulnerability that strengthened their connection. By the end of it, the walls that had formed began to crumble, replaced by a quiet understanding and renewed trust. After that day, they became more aware of how fragile and precious their bond was. Small disagreements or misunderstandings could not shake the connection they shared, but they learned to communicate more clearly, to express feelings before they became heavy and unspoken. The experience brought them closer, showing that love and friendship were not just about happy moments, but also about facing difficulties together with patience and care. On the same time, other challenges began to appear. She faced a family situation that demanded her attention, requiring travel and long hours of communication. He had responsibilities at work that became unexpectedly complicated, forcing him to stay late and take on more than he had planned. Both felt stretched and tired, but they made an effort to check in with each other, sending small messages or finding brief moments to talk. Those small gestures became lifelines, reminders that they were present for each other even when circumstances were difficult. One evening, after a particularly long day, she arrived at the cafe feeling drained. She expected it to be empty, but he was already there, waiting with a warm smile and 2 cups of tea. The simplicity of the gesture made her heart lift. They talked quietly about the day, not trying to solve problems, not trying to fix anything. They simply shared the presence of each other, and in that sharing, they found comfort and relief. The challenges of life had not disappeared, but in their connection. They found a quiet strength that helped them face the next day. They also learned the importance of understanding each other's limits. Some days, she needed space to think and rest, and he respected that. Other days, he needed to focus on work without interruption, and she gave him that without resentment. The mutual respect and patience created a balance that allowed their bond to survive the pressures of everyday life. It was not always easy, but it was real, grounded in honesty, empathy, and the willingness to support each other even when circumstances were not ideal. Small moment of joy came when they discovered a shared interest in music. One afternoon, she mentioned a song she loved, and he listened carefully, appreciating the beauty in her choice. Later, he played a song he thought she would enjoy. They laughed softly together at the unexpected connection between the music and their own experiences. These small discoveries added lightness to their days, moments that reminded them that even in the midst of challenges, there was space for happiness and shared joy despite the misunderstandings and pressures. They continued to find ways to connect. They walked together through quiet streets in the evening, noticing the lights and the soft sounds of the city at night. They talked about dreams and hopes, about places they wanted to visit, and the small joys of life that often went unnoticed. Each shared story, each gentle word, strengthened the bond between them, showing that even when life presented obstacles, the connection they had built was strong and meaningful. They also began to notice how the challenges had changed them. She became more patient, more understanding of the pressures he faced, and he became more attentive to her feelings and needs. The difficulties did not weaken them. Instead, they helped both grow in empathy, compassion, and emotional awareness. The bond they shared was no longer just about the spark of initial connection. It was rooted in shared experience, mutual respect, and the understanding that love required effort as well as joy. By the end of this period, they had learned that misunderstandings, stress, and life's challenges were inevitable. What mattered was how they faced them together. Each difficulty had tested their patience and care, but it had also revealed the depth of their commitment to each other. They realized that their connection was worth the effort, that even when circumstances were hard, the small acts of understanding, kindness, and attention kept their bond alive. Life continued to move forward, but the challenges they had faced together left a lasting impression. They had learned patience, understanding, and the value of small gestures. But neither could have predicted the moment that would test the strength of their bond in a completely different way. One morning, she received a call that made her heart sink. A close family member had fallen ill, and she needed to travel immediately to be with them. The news brought a wave of worry and uncertainty, and for the first time in weeks, she felt fragile in a way she had not expected. He noticed the change in her almost immediately. She tried to hide the anxiety, speaking calmly and trying to plan the trip efficiently. But he saw the tension in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she packed. He offered to help in small ways, making sure she had everything she needed, driving her to the train station and staying quietly by her side until she was ready to leave. His presence, steady and calm, gave her strength even as fear and worry gnawed at her heart. She realized once again that their connection was more than words, more than laughter, more than small shared joys. It was a source of comfort and courage during the journey. She called him occasionally to let him know she had arrived safely. He listened to her voice over the line, offering quiet reassurance and empathy. He could sense her worry, and he did not try to offer solutions. Instead, he simply let her speak, letting her emotions flow freely, providing a presence that was steady and grounding. Even from a distance, the bond they shared felt unbroken, and each conversation reminded them both of the quiet strength they had built together. Meanwhile, he faced his own challenge at work. A project that had seemed routine suddenly demanded attention beyond what he had anticipated. He worked long hours, balancing responsibilities, while keeping in touch with her as best he could. The strain of distance and pressure made the days feel longer, but he found comfort in the knowledge that she was thinking of him as he thought of her. Each small message, each short call, became a thread that kept them connected. Despite the miles between them, she spent long days at the hospital, supporting her family member through treatments and difficult moments. Exhaustion weighed on her body, but her spirit was strengthened by the thought of him waiting, by the small moments of connection they could still share. She sent messages describing small victories, shared small laughs over minor incidents, and sometimes simply sent a quiet word of love to remind him she was still present even when busy with life's demands. Each message was a small bridge between them. Keeping the bond alive and strong, one evening, he decided to visit her, arranging time away from work to make the trip. She had not expected it, and the sight of him walking into the hospital waiting area brought tears to her eyes. They did not speak much at first, simply holding each other, feeling the comfort of a presence that had been absent but never forgotten. In that embrace, all the distance, all the worry, all the pressure of the past days seemed to dissolve. They realized once more that their connection could withstand challenges, distance and uncertainty, because it was built on trust, understanding, and care during the visit. They spent time quietly together in the hospital garden. The world outside was busy and chaotic, but within that small space, they found peace. She spoke about her fears, her worries, and the exhaustion that weighed on her. He listened patiently, offering support through presence rather than words. He shared small stories from his days, the little moments that kept him thinking of her, the quiet observations that reminded him of her smile, her laughter, and the way she faced life with determination, even when burdened by responsibility. But days that followed brought both sorrow and relief. Her family members slowly improved, and she felt the weight of fear lighten. During this period, they grew even closer, learning more about each other's resilience, patience, and capacity to support someone through difficult times. They discovered that love was not always about happiness or ease, but about standing together when life demanded strength and courage. Every shared glance, every quiet conversation, every gentle gesture reinforced the depth of their bond when she finally returned home. They found themselves walking through familiar streets with a new awareness of what they had experienced together. The city felt both familiar and different, as if their journey had shifted something in the way they saw the world and each other. They spoke about small things, laughter returning gradually. But underneath the joy was a deeper understanding, a recognition that life's challenges could be faced more easily when shared with someone who truly cared. They began to create small rituals to stay connected, to celebrate the ordinary moments that made life meaningful. Morning walks became a time for gentle conversation and observation of the world around them. Evenings were spent quietly sharing thoughts about the day, listening to music, or reading together in silence. These small acts, simple and unremarkable to an outsider, carried immense value for them. They were reminders that love was present in the quiet, everyday moments as much as in grand gestures or dramatic events. One afternoon, they discovered a small community event, a gathering of local people sharing stories, music, and food. They decided to attend together, enjoying the warmth of shared experiences in a setting that encouraged connection. They laughed, danced slowly to quiet music, and noticed each other in ways that felt intimate and comforting. The event reminded them that life could be both challenging and beautiful, and that together they could find joy even in simple, unexpected moments. The challenges they had faced also taught them about forgiveness and patience. Small misunderstandings that might have seemed significant before now appeared less important. They learned to communicate openly, to speak honestly about feelings before assumptions and doubts could grow. The trust they had built over time allowed them to navigate difficult moments with grace and care, strengthening their connection rather than weakening it one evening. As they walked along a quiet street illuminated by soft lights, she spoke about dreams she had not shared with anyone before. He listened with attention, asking gentle questions and encouraging her to imagine possibilities she had once thought impossible. Then he shared his own dreams, ambitions, and hopes for the future. They discovered that their visions for life, though unique, complemented each other in ways that felt natural and supportive. This shared understanding added another layer to the connection, reinforcing the sense that they were walking a path together, even without knowing exactly where it is. What led the turning point of their relationship became clear during these weeks. They realized that life's uncertainties and challenges would always exist. But what mattered most was the presence of someone who cared deeply, who listened without judgment, and who offered quiet support when it was most needed. The moments of crisis, the long hours of worry, and the periods of distance had not weakened their bond. Instead, they had revealed the depth of feeling, trust, and resilience that had been quietly growing since the first encounter. Days following their return from the difficult weeks felt different in a way neither had expected. Life was moving forward as usual, with work, responsibilities, and daily routines. But there was a new calm in the way they faced each day. They moved together through the world more attentively, noticing small details and appreciating moments that might once have passed without thought. Every shared smile, every gentle word, every quiet glance became a reminder of the strength and care that had grown between them. They continued to meet in familiar places. The small cafe, the park, and quiet streets where they could walk side by side without hurry. These places had become private islands in the busy city, spaces where they could be fully themselves without worry. They spoke about the ordinary things of life, yet even these conversations carried weight and meaning. Talking about what they had eaten, a small event at work, or a book they had read became opportunities to connect. To share a piece of life that the other could understand and appreciate, sometimes they walked in silence, letting the world around them fill their senses. The gentle rustling of leaves, the soft hum of traffic, the laughter of children playing in a distance, all became part of their shared moments. In these silences, they learned to feel the presence of each other without the need for words. The quiet companionship was comforting, and it reminded them that love was not always about grand gestures, but about steady presence and shared understanding. One afternoon, they decided to visit a nearby river. The water was calm and reflected the soft light of the afternoon sun. They walked along the edge, noticing birds flying overhead, leaves floating on the surface, and the gentle rhythm of the current. They talked about dreams and hopes, about the future they imagined, about places they wanted to visit, and experiences they wanted to share. In these conversations, there was a sense of planning, not just for the next day, but for a life together. Even though they did not put labels or rush the process during these days, they continued to discover small details about each other that brought quiet joy. The way he noticed a small flower by the sidewalk and stopped to admire it reminded her of his thoughtfulness. The way she remembered the tiniest detail about a book he mentioned weeks ago reminded him of her attentiveness. These small gestures and observations, unnoticed by most, became markers of care and affection that strengthened the bond between them. They realized that love could be found in attention and listening. In noticing the little things that mattered to each other, challenges continued to appear, as life never truly paused. She faced moments of stress at work, deadlines that seemed impossible to meet, and responsibilities that weighed heavily. He faced long days at his job, unexpected complications, and pressures from colleagues and superiors. Yet they faced these moments differently now. Instead of letting stress create distance, they leaned on each other, offering quiet encouragement. Small gestures of support and gentle words of reassurance. The difficulties no longer felt isolating because they were shared and softened by the connection between them one evening. They attended a small gathering of friends. The room was warm with conversation, laughter, and music. They moved through the crowd together, noticing each other in subtle ways, holding hands briefly, exchanging small smiles. The world felt lighter in these moments, a contrast to the challenges they faced individually. They realized that even in a busy, crowded, and complicated world, the presence of someone who cared could transform ordinary experiences into moments of joy and comfort as they continued to grow together. They began to dream more openly about the future. They spoke about hopes for a home, a space where they could create memories together. They imagined quiet mornings, shared meals, and long walks in the park. They spoke about journeys to places they had never been, exploring the world together and collecting moments that would become stories they could share in years to come. These conversations were gentle and patient, allowing time for reflection and understanding rather than rushing into decisions. The small gestures of care became part of their daily life. A cup of tea prepared for the other without being asked, a hand held during a long walk, a quiet note left on a desk, a message sent in the middle of a busy day to show presence and thoughtfulness. They discovered that love was not only in words but in these small acts that showed attention, patience, and care. Each act, however simple, reinforced the sense that they were building a life together. Slowly, thoughtfully, and with intention, they also discovered the joy of sharing experiences beyond their usual routines. They explored small museums, attended local performances, and wandered streets they had never noticed before. Each new experience was enriched by the presence of the other. They laughed at small mistakes, marveled at unexpected beauty, and found comfort in the quiet moments when nothing extraordinary happened. Life itself became an adventure, not because of what they did, but because they were together in quiet evenings. They would sit together, sometimes reading, sometimes talking, sometimes simply watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The rhythm of these moments created a sense of safety and warmth. They discovered that the most meaningful experiences were not always loud or dramatic, but often quiet, gentle, and shared. Each moment reinforced the connection they had nurtured through patience, understanding, and resilience. They also continued to support each other through emotional growth. Moments of doubt, insecurity, or fear were met with empathy and care. They learned to speak honestly about feelings, to listen without judgment, and to offer reassurance without pressure. These skills deepened their connection, creating a foundation that allowed them to navigate life's inevitable challenges without fear of losing one another. The growth they experienced individually was strengthened by the care and understanding shared in their partnership over time. They began to notice how naturally they had become part of each other's daily lives. The thought of the other brought comfort, joy, and anticipation. The routines they once faced alone were now shared experiences, enriched by conversation, companionship, and quiet attention. They realized that the small, ordinary moments, walking in the park, having tea, watching the sky, had become extraordinary because they were experienced together one afternoon. They visited a quiet hillside overlooking the city. The sun was low, casting soft light over buildings and streets. They sat together on the grass, talking quietly, laughing softly, and simply enjoying the presence of each other. The world around them felt expansive and alive, but in that shared moment, everything else faded. They understood that life was full of uncertainty and change, but the connection they had built was a constant, steady, and comforting presence. As they walked home that evening, hand in hand, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the first chance encounter, the small smiles, the quiet moments of laughter, the misunderstandings, the challenges, and the periods of care and support, they had grown closer than they had ever imagined possible. Each step of the journey had built something real, strong, and meaningful. They knew that love was not only about happiness, but also about facing life together, learning together, and growing together. Time moved forward in a gentle, steady way, and their days began to take on a deeper meaning than before. They no longer felt like two people walking side by chance. They felt like two lives slowly learning how to move together. Mornings became softer. They woke with a sense of calm, even when the day ahead was full. Knowing someone cared made every task feel lighter. When they were apart during the day, they carried each other in quiet thoughts. A short message or a remembered smile was enough to bring warmth. They began to notice how much they had grown. The worries that once felt heavy now felt manageable. Fears that once stayed hidden were now spoken gently and met with understanding. They were learning that love was not something loud or dramatic. It was something steady and patient, something that showed up every day in small ways. One evening, they walked through a part of the city they had never explored before. The streets were narrow and quiet. Small lights glowed in windows. Air felt peaceful. They talked about the past and how different life felt, now not better in every way, but fuller, richer with meaning. She spoke about the person she used to be, how she once felt alone even in crowded places, how she once believed she had to carry everything by herself. He listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He simply stayed present. She finished. He told her how proud he was of her strength. Those words stayed with her long after the walk ended. He shared his own thoughts later. That night he spoke about the pressure he once put on himself, the belief that he had to be perfect, that he could not slow down. She listened with the same care. She reminded him that rest was not weakness, that being open was a kind of strength. In that moment they both felt seen in a way they never had before. Turned into weeks, their connection continued to deepen. They began making small plans for the future. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just gentle ideas, shared hopes, possibilities. They talked about where they wanted to be in a few years, not just places, but feelings. They wanted peace. They wanted stability. They wanted a life Where kindness mattered, where time was shared, not wasted where. Laughter and quiet moments were both welcome one afternoon. They volunteered together at a local place that helped others. They worked side by side, sorting, cleaning, listening to stories, helping where they could. It was simple work, but meaningful. They saw each other in a new light. They saw compassion, patience. Others together strengthened their bond. It reminded them that love was not only about what they shared with each other, it was also about how they moved through the world, how they treated others, how they chose kindness even when life was tiring there. Were still difficult days when energy was low, when misunderstandings tried to appear again. Now they handled those moments differently. They paused. They spoke calmly. They listened. They listened. Did not let small issues grow into walls. They learned to say. When something hurt, they learned to say when they needed space. They learned that honesty did not weaken love, it protected it. One night they sat together watching the city from above. Lights stretched out like stars. The world felt wide and full of movement. They talked about how quickly time passed, how important it was to appreciate the present. They both felt a quiet certainty, not loud, not overwhelming, just steady. They knew they wanted to keep choosing each other again and again. They did not need promises spoken out loud. Their actions already showed commitment, being they're showing care, making time, listening. These were the promises they lived every day. As seasons changed, their love adapted. In colder months, they stayed close indoors, sharing warmth, talking late into the night. In warmer months, they walked longer, explored more, let the sun and air fill their days. They began to feel like home to each other, not a place, but a feeling, a sense of safety, a sense of belonging. Even on ordinary days, something felt specially shared. Melee, quiet laugh, a moment of understanding. These small things became treasures. They realized that many people searched their whole lives for what they had found. Not perfection, but connection, every moment. But comfort and trust. One morning, they talked about how their story began, the chance meeting, the small moments, the challenges, the growth. It felt almost unreal yet deeply real at the same time. They both understood that skipping moments like these was easy, that people often rushed past. Real connection, chasing, noise chasing, speed chasing, distractions. They were grateful they had slowed down, grateful they had paid attention, grateful they had chosen patience over fear. Their love did not need to be proven to anyone else. It lived in their everyday life, in the way they supported each other, in the way they showed up, in the way they cared. As comes to a close, their journey continues with an ending, but with a steady forward movement to people walking together, choosing kindness, honesty, choosing love. Their story is not one that fades. It is one that grows quietly day by moment. It's by moment, built on trust, care, and the simple, powerful act of not walking away.